Well, some say Sir Tony Blair really is a bad smell that won't go away. Well, that certainly rings true for one piece of particularly damaging legislation brought in under his Labour government that has seen some 3,000 people languishing in prison, potentially forever, for crimes as little as nicking a mobile phone. Thomas White was 28 years old when he was banged up for swiping a phone in 2012. Now, it wasn't his first theft, but 12 years on, the now 40-year-old father of one from Bury in Greater Manchester is still behind bars with no prospect of release. He's only met his son, Caden, once when he was 9 months old. The lad is now 14. And it's all down to Blair's imprisonment for public protection laws, which came into force in 2005 in a bid to make Labour appear tough on crime. Indefinite sentences, from which release is very, very tricky, were meant for extremely dangerous rapists, killers and paedophiles. But they were used far more than widely intended, with the Tories rightly scrapping IPP completely in 2012 amid public outrage. But the only problem is that those previously convicted under the law are still suffering from it, not including 86 IPP prisoners who have since committed suicide in prison. The UN's leading torture expert has rightly condemned the situation as shameful. Now, though, Baroness Claire Fox is rallying the House of Lords to ask the government to re-sentence those still serving controversial sentences. Baroness Fox joins me live now alongside Anthony Hipkiss, who is an ex-IPP prisoner who served 16 years for threats to kill under an IPP sentence and was released in February. Both of you, thank you very much. Claire, I'll start with you, if that's all right. Why do you care so passionately about this? Why have you made it a big cause for you? Can you just explain in a bit more detail for us, please?
Well, yes, of course. One thing to really stress is that as much as I would like this to be, an attack on Tony Blair and his legacy, one of the things that's most frustrating is that it's a much broader problem than something that happened in the past, because the sentences were abolished in 2012. And what I've been calling for, and when I first heard they'd been abolished, I thought, brilliant, it's going to give people a chance to get off this terrible sentencing regime, which is never fair, backfired. And I couldn't get over it when I discovered a few years later that there were still people languishing in prison. So my target here is not the Blair government. Actually, it's also the case that I'm hanging on the coattails of people across the House of Lords from all parties. Daniel Moylan, Lord Moylan, who's often on GBNews. People on the Labour side who have made it very clear that they regret what happened. And so we are basically now saying that the government have got to have the courage to re-sentence. One small bit thing I want to say is the excuse often given by both the Labour front bench and the government is almost like, oh, well, the problem is if we let these 3,000 people go and something awful happens, then the type of people who read the Daily Mail or watch GBNews or blame us. And I've always argued, and that was why I had an article in the Daily Mail and why I'm here on GBNews, that ordinary working people hate injustice. They do not want to see people banged up forever for minor crimes. No. That's not the basis of what they want public protection. No.
I mean, look, the vast majority of people who watch this show want to see serious violent criminals locked up for a very long time. They want to see extremists locked up, terrorists, rapists, paedophiles, all of that stuff. They don't want to see someone who swiped a phone 14 years ago being denied access to his kid, who is now 14 years old. I mean, people don't want that, OK? Anthony, I'll bring you in here. Now, I've been staggered by the amount of people who have, unfortunately, taken their own life behind bars here. You were in custody for 16 years. What was the effect of the potential never release for you on all of this? And what do you think about these sentences?
Well, I was nearly number 87 on that list several times because it came to a point 10 years into my sentence. Bearing in mind I was only given a 15-month tariff, that I thought, well, there's no point. I'm not going to get released. I've done all the programmes they've asked me to do, but any little hiccup I had in prison just meant I was getting knockback after knockback. And we're not talking 2 or 3 months, we're talking a year or two before you're then entitled to another parole board. So it just came to a point where I just thought, you know what, like the other 86, there's no point continuing. And I know some of these 86 people that have died. Some people are really close friends of mine. And it brought me out to see them go. But I sort of understood why they did what they did, because there was just no hope. And like I said, I attempted suicide 3 times on 3 different occasions, and luckily I failed because I went on to challenge myself and improve myself and become the man I am today. But like 86 of my brothers, and it was all men, unfortunately. There are some female IPPs in prison, but it was all men, was lost to this ridiculous sentence. And I say ridiculous because I'm one of the few people that say advocate for IPPs were pretty much would have been good had they been used the right way. But when you hear people like the guy just saying stealing a mobile phone, I had a friend what stole a pack of crisps and some sweets and got an 8-month IPP out of someone's pocket. He did nearly 14 years.
Sorry, Anthony. Let me just. No, I've got to emphasise that, Anthony. Yeah. So, sorry, you knew someone who stole some sweets and did 14 years.
So the charge was classed as street robbery, which in itself obviously sounds like a really violent offence. Which, of course, let's not minimise what he did. He robbed somebody on the streets and put someone in that position. But he ran off with. He went for the wallet and the phone, but he absolutely ran off with a pack of sweets because he couldn't get nothing. This guy got 8-month IPP and did 14 years behind bars. This is the system that Blair's left us with, and this is the system that Lord Blunkett's left us with. And you can see it before the lights from me and roll his eyes and tell us that he feels sorry for what he's done, but he's left thousands of families, grieving, and 86 families will never see their partners again. And I know the public will say, okay, then these people have committed crimes under right. And, personally talking about myself, I needed removed from the streets. I didn't need 16 years.
It's a question of proportionality, Anthony, isn't it? I think it's a question of proportionality, and people understand that. Claire, I'll come back to you on this now. Look, we went to Labour for comment on this. They've got no comment on it at the moment. There are also some horrendous stories about people developing significant mental health issues in prison as well, being surrounded in that environment and the kind of stuff that can go on in there. I mean, you must have heard about some of that as well, Claire, presumably.
Yeah, and I've done work as the Academy of Ideas. We've got a project that we started, which is Debating Matters Beyond Bars, which was working in prisons, right? So I want to emphasise, Anthony just being so articulate. I'm, brilliant advocate for what he believes. People are caught for a crime, and you get time, and you do the time, and then you come out of prison. That's the way we do it in a British justice system. Can you imagine what it's like? People will say, I was a bad lad, I should be in for a few years, you know what I mean? But then it ends, and then you go out and you try and rebuild your life. This is a sentence that never, ever ends, because you can easily have it extended, as we've heard, for decades. And then even when you're released, you're on the most ridiculously impossible to live to licenses. People are recalled back in. So when you're asking me what we should do, this is as big a scandal as the post office scandal. And as far as I'm concerned, the fact that in a modern democratic society, people are hopeless, where you just tell them that their lives are, that is not the kind of justice system we want. We would criticise any other country that had it. So I think, as somebody said, let's wait for there to be an ITV drama before we do something about this. We need to make it a public issue, and I'm glad that you're covering it, Patrick. It's great.
Well, no, thank you for being so vocal about it as well. And look, I just wonder as well, Anthony, we cover a lot of soft justice stories on this show, all right? We have people who've done some unspeakable things, members of grooming gangs that have got 2.5 years or something, and Colin Pitchfork's been out and about, I think you're right, he did serve a fair long time, but the fact is he's now back out and about, or was for a little bit anyway. All of these stories, right, about people who've done unspeakable crimes, and presumably people like yourself would have been, or the person who nicked a packet of sweets or swiped a mobile phone will have been sitting in prison watching some of these monsters come and go.
Yeah, so one of the things we used to find hard when the IPP was abolished is that guys what was given the same sentence as us, or sometimes worse, would get released before us because they'd be given the sentence we would have been given had we not been given an IPP. So I was watching people what committed, I was banged up at the same time as someone who murdered his boyfriend. He got 13 years due life. He got out before me. That was for a murder. That's for killing an individual. And this individual got out before me. Yes, rehabilitated, but still, and without minimalising my own offence, which obviously I had victims, and I had I had a bigger past before that, and I'd done prison several times. I threatened to kill somebody, and I served 3 years more than a murderer. This is the system we're living in, Patrick. And the system in prison is broken, and it's ridiculously underfunded.
Okay, go on, Claire.
That's why I think there's a mental health problem. And this is what the almost Kafkaesque nature of this sentence is. People actually are in despair. Can you imagine the whole irrationality of that? And also never knowing, whether you'll be let out because you haven't got a sentence like anybody normally in prison. So you can't really rehabilitate. And people develop serious mental ill health. Guess what stops you getting out when you're on an IPP? What the parole board says is they don't want to hear from you if you've got a mental health problem, because that makes you too dangerous to leave the prison. And the whole thing is policy. By the way, it's sold to us as public protection. And I think it's understandable. The public want to be protected. You've just explained, Patrick. There's a whole range of issues where the police won't do their job.
Yeah.
Where if you're having a burglary, you can't get them to come round. So when the government say, which is what they're saying now, so that's why it's not just Labour, the Tory government say, we want to protect you. We're not letting out these dangerous IPP prisoners, even though we abolish the sentence. That then makes people think, oh, well, maybe we won't let them out. And it's actually a con. They're conning the public on this one.
Yeah, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. I would like to keep track of this, all right? So I do hope to talk to you both again very, very soon. All right, all the best. Good luck with everything. We approached Tony Blair for comment, but we are yet to hear back. A Ministry of Justice spokesman said this: we have reduced the number of unleashed IPP prisoners by 3/4 since we scrapped the sentence in 2012, with a 12% fall in the last year alone where the parole board deemed prisoners safe to be released. We've also taken decisive action to curtail licence periods and continue to help those still in custody to progress towards release, including improving access to rehabilitation programmes and mental health support. Can I just say, I know that there will probably quite a few people watching this now, shouting at their TV screens, going, well, we don't commit a crime then. Look, I know, all right, I get that, okay, and I am usually very vocal about that. But you do have to look at some of the stories that we cover here. I'll hark back to it again just quickly. People who've committed absolutely obscene issues with grooming gangs who managed to get 2 years in prison and they're back out and about, all right? And then you compare that to someone who's had 14 years and could serve the rest of his life in prison for swiping a mobile phone. I don't mind going into bat for those people. Baroness Claire Fox and Anthony Hipkiss, thank you very, very much.